You can do all the worksheets in the world and still feel like a stranger in your own life. That's exactly what happened to Kevin until one shift helped him believe again. This isn't about more drills or worksheets. It's about the deeper question survivors ask. Is this really it for me? Today you'll hear Kevin's story, how he went from silence and shame to believing recovery was still possible. And I'll show you why neuroplasticity is the science that makes that belief real. So this episode is for survivors who feel therapy ended and they wonder if their recovery ended too. This episode is also for care partners who see their loved one shrinking back, becoming quieter, or maybe even pushing them away. Why this matters. Too many people believe recovery has an expiration date, and it doesn't. So let's meet Kevin. Kevin was an executive. He was the guy everybody looked to. He was excellent at his job, had lots of experience, had been with the company for a really long time. A year after his stroke, his bosses believed in him enough to bring him back, but not at the executive level he left at, but as the lowest level supervisor role on the team that he used to lead. He was the man with the most knowledge and credibility, but in meetings he stayed silent. He let other people speak for him. He definitely felt grateful to be back at work, but inside he felt devastation because he didn't think he was the man that he used to be. He tried to fix it by switching therapy from one outpatient clinic to another, by doing even more than just the drilling worksheets that the speech therapist gave him. He worked all the exercises, did the online apps. But what he found is that none of these efforts, tasks, exercises translated into work or home life. This gap crushed his identity. At home, frustration followed him from the moment he walked in the door. When his wife would ask him about his day or how he did at speech therapy, he would snap at her and he'd leave the room. He would isolate himself. When they would eat dinner at night, they wouldn't talk to each other. She didn't know how to break that barrier because his silence made her feel like she was in this all alone. She didn't know how to reach him, and he just kept pushing her away. Over time, they just became roommates. And then it was one day that Kevin had a conversation with a friend, and it planted the first seed that maybe there was a different way. Maybe it wasn't too late to still get recovery. The stalled recovery. This is where many survivors land, where therapy ends. The calendar is not full of therapy appointments anymore, and it feels like your recovery is over. Because what we know is that rehab does not necessarily prepare you for this transition to go from having a calendar full of appointments, whether you are in an inpatient rehab or you're in home health or you're an outpatient. They don't prepare you for that discharge when they've just given you the keys to the car and they say, go live. Worksheets can show progress on worksheets, but worksheets do not necessarily reveal the changes in life or give you the skills that you need to go out there and communicate in the real world. And this leads to a hidden pain because it's not just about speech, it's about identity and confidence and having a good marriage and your self-worth and interacting with your kids and family and your hobbies and doing fun things. So progress in therapy may not translate into progress in life. So now we're going to talk about spontaneous versus dependent recovery. And I want you to stick with me on this section because it's an important concept. You may recall that in the early days after your stroke and you're having aphasia, you probably have heard the term spontaneous recovery. It also can be called independent recovery. What on earth does this even mean? It refers to the brain that heals on its own. It's about the swelling going down. It's about increased blood flow. It's about connections being made again in the brain. But here's the part that no one says enough. The brain never stops changing. And that's where neuroplasticity is the word of the day. We've talked about neuroplasticity before, and that refers to the brain rewiring itself. And the brain rewires itself based on what you do, what you practice, and what you believe. So rehab in those first 6 months after the stroke is where we have spontaneous, also referred to as independent recovery, but there's also a component of dependent recovery where you're working with the therapist, with the physicians, you're getting your meds right, you're getting your exercise routine, you're getting your home program set up, you're learning how to do more things on your own. So that's what rehab is capitalizing on in those first 6 months. But what they don't talk about is the dependent recovery that happens after rehab ends. What does that mean? Dependent recovery refers to your recovery is dependent upon you. Your recovery is dependent upon, do you believe you can get better? Do you put in the time, the energy to practice different things that you've learned in rehab? You may be continuing with those worksheets, but what are you doing in addition to worksheets and online apps? Are you practicing your communication strategies with your wife? Are you figuring out how to do more communication things on your own? Putting yourself in maybe a scary, not like your life is in jeopardy scary, but mentally, emotionally, psychologically scary situation. Maybe you're at Starbucks and for the first time you're going to try to do your own ordering. And maybe you have a backup plan to support yourself. Maybe you're using a total communication approach to be able to place this order and get the coffee drink you want when they deliver it to you. So there's spontaneous recovery, also known as independent recovery. It usually ends about the 6-month mark. So when doctors, and some doctors still say this to this very day, some clinicians may also say it too, that you have reached a plateau. Let that word plateau or that discharge from rehab be your clue that now that your recovery is dependent upon what you put into it. You practicing, you following through, you doing new things that make you maybe uncomfortable, but with continued practice leads to success, which leads to confidence, which leads to rebuilding your identity. Do you see how we have to understand this shift? Belief plus structure equals progress. Kevin didn't just need another worksheet. He needed to believe that change was possible. That belief gave him the courage to build small, repeatable frameworks with his wife. They learned how to have dinner table conversations where they could practice without pressure. At night, when they were getting ready to fall asleep, they'd each be doing their reading. She'd be reading silently her book. He would be practicing reading out loud so he could work on his verbal fluency and flow and building up his confidence. If he got stuck on a word, his wife was there to assist. He was also a big entertainer, meaning he was the one that did the cooking. He was the one that initiated having friends and family come over for barbecues or come over for dinner. So he would work with his wife and they would divvy up the roles and simplify the processes so that he could do more and more every time he entertained. Every one of those repetitions he did for those actual tasks he was doing wasn't just practice. It was neuroplasticity in action. It was dependent practice in action. Because every time he did it, he told his brain, this matters, and this strengthens the connections, the rewiring of the brain. It's just like building a muscle. If you are trying to build your biceps, you have to do heavier weight, right? Or you need to vary up your repetitions or the exact exercise that you're doing. It is no different for recovering in aphasia. So here's the take-home message. Neuroplasticity is the science behind recovery. Belief is the ignition behind recovery, and structure is the pathway. Why does this matter for you? Kevin was 3 years post-stroke when everything started to shift for him. There is proof that it is not too late. Kevin, by doing dependent recovery practice, by challenging himself, by working on tasks that were maybe a little scary for him, but allowed him to build that muscle and confidence. Plus, he saw that by working with the right clinician, doing these right kind of life tasks, things at work, things at home, things out in the community, he was able to strengthen his brain's connections through neuroplasticity. But you have to practice to do it. Sometimes it is something as simple as reading out loud if that's something you need to work on. Maybe it's working on repetitive writing practice or typing up an email over and over until it gets simpler where your brain is processing. Do not discount the power of repetition. So this matters to you, the survivor with aphasia. Why does neuroplasticity and dependent practice matter? It means you are not stuck. Your brain is still capable of change. And for care partners, your hope, your belief, your encouragement is so important to your survivor because that can be the bridge that helps your loved one take the wheel again, to be in charge of their own recovery, to see what is possible, to be inspired, to find that purpose again. So I have a question for you. Where have you started to believe the story that it's too late? Did someone in rehab tell you you reached a plateau and so we're discharging you from therapy? Did you believe that that was the truth? But what if that belief is what is holding you back? What if that belief that recovery is over keeps you sitting on that couch, not trying, not doing new things? This week, I want you to choose one small daily practice. Is it pulling out some of those worksheets and working on them? Talking it over with your significant other or your kid and saying, how can we work on this but in a different way? You don't have to take the exact exercise that a clinician has given you. Think about a different way to apply it. Maybe you were working on reading these sentences out loud. Well, why don't you try writing them or typing them or dictating into your phone as if it were a text? Why not practice these things, but in lots of different ways? Because the more variety you can give your brain, the better the connection, the better the neuroplasticity. So Kevin's story shows us the truth. Recovery doesn't stop when therapy ends. Belief opens the door, neuroplasticity fuels the process, and structure and repetition makes it real. If you want to see the exact steps Kevin used, I created a free guide. It's called 3 Keys to Life Beyond Aphasia, and it shows you how to bridge the gap between therapy and real life by using strategies you can start right away. The link is below. Grab your copy now. Until next time, listen for life and take back what matters.